The Massachusetts eviction notice. What is an eviction notice? Eviction notice, or notice to quit, is a letter sent by the landlord to the tenant notifying them that they should either take or stop a certain action or vacate the rented premises. Eviction notice can be of two types: conditional, when a tenant is given time to remedy the breach of the lease, or unconditional, when a landlord terminates the lease without any alternative options for a tenant. What should an eviction notice include? Information about the tenant and the landlord. The reason for sending the notice. The date by which the tenant should take or stop a certain action. The consequences of non-compliance. The date and way of notice delivery, and the landlord's signature in the form of certificate of service attached to the notice. How to evict a tenant in Massachusetts. The non-payment notice. There is a statutory 30-day rental grace period in the state of Massachusetts. It means the landlord cannot assess a late fee or charge interest on the unpaid rent until 30 days after the rent is due. The Massachusetts legislature requires the landlord to send a 14-day notice to quit to the tenant failing to pay rent due prior to starting an eviction lawsuit. However, if the tenant uses this time to pay sums owed and associated fees, the lease might not be terminated. Non-compliance notice. For other types of lease violations, Massachusetts law does not require the landlord to give the tenant the possibility to correct the issue. But for tenancy at will, when the tenant pays rent daily or weekly, a 7-day notice to quit should be sent by the landlord. No notice is required when the tenant or people who also occupy rented premises with them are involved in illegal activity. In such a case, termination of the lease can come into effect immediately. What if the tenant fails to comply? If the landlord aims at starting an eviction process, they should first send the tenant the summons and complaint no less than 7 days before filling the documents with the court. It should be done with the help of the local sheriff or other authorized person. Only then should the landlord file the documents with the court. A complaint can be filed with the housing or district court, and the fee will range from $120 to $180. The tenant can file an answer with the court, but it is not the state's requirement. If they decide to do so, they should file an answer within a 7-day period after the entry date. Failure to appear for the hearing, even in the case of filing the answer, might result in the judgment in favor of the landlord by default. If the judge rules in the landlord's favor, the court will issue a writ of execution. In Massachusetts, such an order gives the tenant 48 hours to move out. If they fail to do it, they will be forcibly evicted by a law enforcement officer. However, the tenant can request a stay of execution from the court that might grant them up to 12 months of stay in the rental unit.